Should,
Committee will come to order. I'd like to begin this hearing by stating the Oversight and Government Reform mission statement. We exist to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have a right to know that the money Washington takes from them is well spent. And second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. We will work tirelessly in partnership with citizen watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the Federal bureaucracy. This is the mission of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. I appreciate everybody being here today to today's hearing. We have 4 people who are here in person that are going to testify. I appreciate you being here. We do have one gentleman, Mr. John Florence, who's in southern Georgia, and by a mutual agreement between the majority and the minority, he will be giving his opening statement and testifying via video. We will do the questioning of Mr. Florence before we get to the questioning of the panel that's here in person in Washington, D.C. At the conclusion of his testimony, we will question him. We will dismiss him. We will thank him for his participation, and then we will focus on the 4 people that are here today. There is a few seconds delay, and so some patience and understanding that he won't be able to hear us and we won't be able to hear his response for a few seconds given the technology, but I think this is the appropriate way to go and appreciate the indulgence. First, I'd like to give my statement, and then we'll allow the minority to give the same. It has been brought to light that there are some serious challenges and problems with the use of overtime, often called administratively uncontrollable overtime, or AUO. We're going to look today at the desk jockeys who milk the system and the public trust and steal from Americans by abusing the system. We're also going to try to give more consistency and look at those that are working hard on the border and doing the job that Americans deserve and need, and the good work that they do, and how we compensate them as well. Our hearing examines the recent Office of Special Counsel letter to the President, which described the pervasive misuse of administrative uncontrollable overtime, AUO, by employees at the Department of Homeland Security. Special Counsel Carolyn Lerner found abuse of this form of overtime pay to be, quote, profound and entrenched, end quote, problem at Department of Homeland Security, characterizing the practice as, quote, a gross waste of scarce government funds, end quote. She will testify that this was not an isolated occurrence, but a persistent pattern of costing Americans what could be tens of millions of dollars every year. And this is just the Department of Homeland Security. By definition, administratively uncontrollable overtime is a form of overtime pay used to compensate employees who occupy positions requiring substantial amounts of irregular, unscheduled work. AUO ranges from sometimes 10 to 25% of a worker's base pay, and this compensation goes towards their pension. So not only if they were abusing it, or would they be stealing from the American people at the time that it occurred, but they will be compensated for years, if not decades, into the future by continuing to reap the benefits of that as a calculation for their pension. Despite a 2008 investigation by the Office of Special Counsel and the subsequent promise from the Department of Homeland Security to stop the abuse, CBP failed to implement an agency-wide directive to better manage the overtime policy. Instead, employees were shown a video explaining the rules of the AUO. What is intolerable is the fact that this was highlighted as a problem in 2008. It was pointed out almost the exact same thing, and yet it still continues today. In fact, it seems to have grown and spread. Allegations of abuse have come from across the Department, including at CBP's headquarters in Washington, D.C. The Office of Special Counsel's ongoing review of information disclosed by whistleblowers at just 6 of the Department of Homeland Security offices found nearly $9 million wasted annually. Again, this was just at a snapshot of 6 offices. The Office of Special Counsel substantiated the disclosures made by DHS employees that Special Counsel Lerner will elaborate on here today. Also equally disturbing are the 5 additional whistleblower allegations described in the OSC's letter to the President, including the disclosure by one of today's witnesses, Mr. John Florence. And we appreciate his participation and willingness to step up and do the brave thing. It is inexplicable that the Department of Homeland Security would allow its employees to regularly abuse the AUO, despite claiming in its budget that CBP is, quote, constantly reviewing the use of all overtime hours and conducting the operations and activities by all employees performed in the field and at the headquarters level, end quote. That's not true. That's not true, and we're going to explore why Homeland Security thinks that they can put out such a grandiose statement. The Department of Homeland Securities have abused the public trust by routinely claiming AUO up to 2 hours a day every day, including the Department of Homeland Security headquarters and while on training assignments where no qualifying circumstances appear to exist. We're not talking in this instance necessarily about the people that are actually on the border driving out from Yuma to get, a couple hours to go to their station. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about desk jockeys who are sitting at headquarters and at training facilities where it's fairly predictable what's going to happen. There's a difference. There's a difference, and we're going to explore that. Was the Department of Homeland Security unable or unwilling to bring an end to the longstanding practice that pads the pockets and pensions of Homeland Security employees who watch sports and entertainment channels on a daily basis at taxpayer expense? Part of the answer to this question may stem from the fact that this behavior was endorsed by management, in many cases also practiced by management themselves. According to CBP's own data, in 2013, agents at Border Patrol headquarters claimed an average of 20 hours of overtime pay per period, one of the highest administratively uncontrollable overtimes of any CBP duty station. According to the Office of Special Counsel, quote, "The attached report confirms that Situation Room employees in Washington, D.C. claim to have worked 2 hours of AUO following their assigned shift 89% of the time." 89% of the time, the people working there claimed overtime. Again, these are not the Border Patrol agents on the front line who are doing the tough, difficult thing. Let me I want to read something here from one of the Office of Special Counsel. In her report, this is page 3 of her letter from the Office of Special Counsel to the President of the United States. A whistleblower at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service's headquarters facility in Washington, D.C. alleged abuses of AUO in 2010 while the whistleblower worked in the Office of Security and Integrity. The whistleblower alleged that everyone in OSI claimed 10 hours of AUO every week, even though no employee performed work that qualified, not one. This whistleblower requested that her position be made ineligible for AUO and also advised supervisors that AUO was being routinely misused. The whistleblower was initially told she could not be decertified from AUO because it would draw unwanted attention to the office. While the whistleblower was eventually decertified, the AUO abuse by others has not stopped. DHS is required to submit a report in response to these allegations by November 13th. I don't know who this whistleblower is, but she's the one that should probably be running that department and that agency and that group. God bless her for stepping up and drawing out and highlighting a problem. That's exactly the kind of person that should be running that. Again, this is not we're talking about the Commissioner's Situation Room, which I'm going to take as a fairly important position and an important place. Now, last week I introduced some bipartisan legislation, H.R. 3463, to address the abuse raised by the Office of Special Counsel. The bill will create a consistent, reliable pay system, enhance border security, and is anticipated to save the taxpayers more than $1 billion over 10 years, according to the initial estimates. New pay scale, along with a long-term solution, will iron out the kinks of a system through old-fashioned planning and time management. These changes will both reduce the opportunities to abuse the system and provide compensation for unanticipated emergencies, such as actually capturing people who are illegally coming across our borders. I believe it's a logical solution. I look forward to working with my colleagues, including the Chairman of Federal Workforce Subcommittee and original co-sponsor Blake Farenthold, to advance the bill. Again, we've done it in a very bipartisan way. When we introduced it, we had 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. I want to thank the 6 whistleblowers for disclosing this gross waste to the Office of Special Counsel. I appreciate Mr. Florence for his willingness to share his story with the committee. Mr. Florence has faced a number of challenges facing his disclosure, And I'll take the opportunity to remind Homeland Security that this committee, in a very bipartisan way, will not tolerate any sort of retaliation or retribution against Mr. Florence or any other whistleblower who is simply trying to make this government more effective and more responsible to the American people. And finally, in my conclusion here, I need to say we continue to be deeply disappointed for those of you working at Homeland Security who are failed to offer this committee your testimony prior to your being here today. I'm sure you're both very nice people. We verbally called and said that we were going to have this hearing. We sent letters to your supervisors saying that we were going to have this hearing here today. We asked that that testimony be provided by 10 a.m. yesterday. We never received your testimony prior to your being here today. Now, I know you worked through a process with the Office of Management and Budget. They know the drill. They also know there's no excuse for not providing testimony prior to coming before Congress. It allows us on both sides of the aisle to review that testimony and be properly prepared so we have a worthwhile hearing. This is a consistent drumbeat and pattern from Homeland Security to jerk around the United States Congress. Please carry back the message with your legislative liaisons. This is not tolerable, and yet it continues and it persists. We'll now recognize, if there's another member, we'll recognize, we will now recognize the gentlewoman for a very generous 5 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to thank the panelists for being here. And, of course, this is a committee whose job it is to improve the effectiveness of government and be clear about accountability in all facets. I'm reading the opening statement of Representative John Tierney, who's the ranking member on the subcommittee. Thank you, Chairman Chaffetz, for holding this hearing to discuss concerns raised by a recent Office of Special Counsel report regarding the misuse of overtime payments called administratively uncontrollable overtime by employees at the Department of Homeland Security. Regulation restricts the use of this type of overtime to a very limited set of circumstances, such as when a Border Patrol agent is investigating criminal activity. According to the report, however, over the last year, 7 whistleblowers have alleged routine misuse of AUO in separate DHS offices amounting to nearly $9 million per year. Now, I understand that 2 of these cases have now been substantiated by an agency investigation after referral from the special counsel. One other case was resolved through mediation, and the remaining 4 cases are pending agency investigation. In one of the substantiated cases, the Department confirmed that numerous employees and managers in a Customs and Border Protection, a CBP, headquarters unit called the Commissioner's Situation Room, regularly misused AUO by claiming 2 hours of AUO following their assigned shift nearly every day and in the absence of a compelling law enforcement need. The Department also confirmed that the Director and Assistant Director authorized and abetted this improper practice. Mr. Chairman, I could yield the rest of the opening statement time to the ranking. All right. I'll proceed. The whistleblower told investigators that instead of working, these employees routinely spent their AUO hours relaxing, surfing the Internet, watching television shows, or taking care of personal matters. Other whistleblowers, like Mr. John Florence, who will be testifying today via video conference, have alleged that AUO is routinely being used to improperly complete administrative tasks or to cover shift changes. It has also been alleged that some employers were not even present at their duty station during the claimed AUO period. I welcome Mr. Florence's testimony on this topic and appreciate his willingness to share his story with us. Special Counsel Lerner, who is here with us here today, has expressed serious concerns that these cases and a prior disclosure in 2007 reveal long-standing abuse of overtime payments by the Department and strongly indicate that the Department of Homeland Security has a profound and entrenched problem. In her report, Special Counsel Lerner also questions the ability and willingness of DHS and CBP to address the AUO problem. And after revelations of routine abuses in 2008, CBP promised to issue and implement an agency-wide directive on AUO, and 5 years later, such a directive has not yet been issued. These disclosures and the Department's slow progress in addressing the issue appear to point to a larger and more fundamental problem, that the misuse, this administrative overtime, has become ingrained. The Special Counsel has noted that collecting AUO has become a culturally acceptable practice, and the National Border Patrol Council has stated that AUO long been promised, advertised, and used by every single agent who's a non-supervisor. While misuse of the administrative overtime cannot be tolerated, I fully appreciate the importance of AUO for frontline agents and officers who are protecting our borders. And I want to make sure that this will be available for those DHS employees who really need it to carry out the agency's mission. I hope that I'll do it, I've got it, don't worry. That DHS, I just do Department and Homeland Security, I think will be more effective, CBP, and the National Border Patrol Council will be able to provide this subcommittee with insight into how AUO is being used, any challenges the Department and its components face under the current system, and how the problem is being addressed. I also look forward to hearing our witnesses' thoughts on whether AUO, which was created 40 years ago, can be fixed or whether it should be replaced by an alternative overpay system. And before I conclude my statement, I would like to ask my colleagues to not let their outrage over these whistleblower disclosures taint our view of Federal workers, the vast majority of whom are hardworking and dedicated civil servants who devote their lives to honorably serving and protecting the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I would yield the remainder of the time to the ranking member and Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, particularly that last comment, which I wholeheartedly agree on. I think this is an abuse that is being ferreted out, but you're right, the overwhelming majority of people at Homeland Security and other agencies, they do it right, and they work hard, and they're patriotic, and they don't abuse the system. But there is widespread abuse here, and we do need to word it out. So we're now going to recognize our panel. Mr. John Flores, who's joining us via video, serves as the branch chief at the Field Operations Academy for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Ms. Catherine Eberson is the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Ronald Vitello is the Deputy Chief of the Office of Border Patrol within the Customs and Border Protection. Mr. Brandon Judd is the President of the National Border Patrol Council, and Ms. Lerner is the Special Counsel, Office of Special Counsel, and issued one of the reports to the President that we're here talking about today. We appreciate you, Ms. Lerner, being here as well. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify. You would please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative, and you may be seated. I'm going to go ahead and assume that Mr. Flores did the same, even though he's done there remotely. In order to allow time for discussion, we would appreciate if you would limit your testimony to 5 minutes. We're going to start actually with Mr. Flores, and like I said, we'll do his opening statement. We'll then go to Ms. Lerner, we'll go down the line, and then we will question Mr. Flores. At the conclusion of our questioning of him, then we will focus our questions to the remaining panel. Well, let's try with the technology here to start with Mr. Flores. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and members of the subcommittee. My name is John Florence. It is my honor to testify in front of this panel on the subject of authorized uncontrollable overtime violations within Customs and Border Protection. I sincerely apologize I could not be there in person. However, my serious medical challenges, my physicians have advised me not to do so. While on my assignment as Acting Assistant Director at the Field Operations Academy, on August 20th, 2012, I received a detailed email message, which was also sent to the Field Operations Academy Director, Kevin Strong, Deputy Director, Michael Brown, and Assistant Director Select, Kevin Levan. This email identified serious concerns about AUO violations by employees and senior level managers at the FOA. The allegations were AUO was being scheduled on a regular and reoccurring basis for work that was not uncontrollable and was primarily administrative and managerial in nature. AUO employee shifts were being manipulated from normal Academy business hours of 7:30 to 16:30 to 7 to 3 o'clock, and then claiming AUO nearly every day from 3 to 5 o'clock. Lunch breaks were not being taken to maximize AUO earnings during normal business hours. AUO was being claimed for work that should have been completed during normal business hours, and also of note but not identified in this email was AUO earners would receive approximately 20 hours of AUO per pay period, or 25% of their base annual salaries. I scheduled several meetings on this matter with Deputy Director Brown and sent several comprehensive email messages voicing my concerns. Unfortunately, it became apparent that the AUO violations were not receiving due diligence and would continue to be authorized by former Director Strong because he was also significantly benefiting from the AUO pay. This was even after former Director Strong and Deputy Director Brown received comprehensive AUO guidance on August 14, 2012 from other senior level Border Patrol managers. On September 4, 2012, I filed a joint intake center investigation for a comprehensive review by Customs and Border Protection Headquarters investigative components because of my concerns about mismanagement by senior level managers locally. Additionally, on September 11, 2012, I sent Deputy Director Brown an email message regarding my concerns about continuing authorization of AUO pay when it was clearly in violation of the policy. And based on these facts, I no longer felt comfortable approving it. After I advised Deputy Director Brown that I filed a joint intake center investigation on the AUO violations, former Director Strong ordered that all AUO concerns and approvals would go through him directly until Assistant Director Kevin Levan reported for duty. Assistant Director Levan was also an AUO earner. After almost 1 year had passed and I had not received a response or any indication that anything was being done to stop the AUO violations that was being observed at the Field Operations Academy and was prevalent throughout the rest of the Office of Training and Development and headquarters assignments, with the exception of a headquarters sending out an AUO training mandate on August 27, 2012 for all supervisors and managers to complete. However, this effort was ineffective because after this requirement was satisfied, the AUO violations continued. This reminded me of the actions that was taken by the agency in 2007 on the Lyndon, Washington Office of Special Counsel case Delta India 080663 on AUO violations. After applying due diligence to stop the AUO violations within my chain of command and through the agency's investigative branches with no success, it became apparent that I needed to file outside the agency as a whistleblower with the Office of Special Counsel. Also of concern was the disparaging pay practices, which was causing low morale because many employees were working in the same work areas and in identical positions. However, the Border Patrol 1896 employees were receiving up to an additional 25% of their base pay, which to my understanding was also being utilized to calculate their retirement annuities. Many of the 1895 employees and managers that were not receiving any additional pay had serious concerns about equal pay for equal work. This was because they were also working 10 to 12-hour days and were being required to be on call, but were not receiving any additional compensation. I would like to close by saying that this experience has been the hardest decision in my 27-year federal law enforcement career. Concerning reporting the AUO violations and including former Director and Deputy Director Brown in my testimony, because they have been friends, colleagues, and mentors of mine for the last 15 years. It goes without saying, to do the right thing sometimes comes with a tremendous price is an understatement. Reporting the AUO violations has taken its toll on my career, personal life, and health. Because of my mental anguish, stress, and retaliatory treatment I have received since reporting the AUO violations to my superiors, and due to the medications I was taking after a serious back surgery on February 10th, 2013, I almost lost my life. I had a serious excuse me. I had a serious medical incident which caused me to be in an intensive care unit for 4 days. I'm sorry for losing my bearing. My chances for survival were very low and I was in the fight for my life. Today I stand before you with my life irrevocably damaged, being permanently disabled and unsure of my future with the agency. Committee members, I've asked myself this question a number of times. Would I do it again? Would I report these blatant AUO violations if I knew what I know now? The answer is yes, because it was my duty to do so. It was the right thing to do. It was a violation of one of CBP's core values, which is integrity. And it was a serious fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayers' dollars. Thank you very much.
Mr. Florence, we thank you. We thank you very much. If you can, I appreciate that. It's very heartfelt, and we appreciate it. It's very helpful, and let us go through the testimony of the other four, and then we will come back to you for questions. Now I recognize Ms. Lerner for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today about overtime abuse disclosed by whistleblowers at the Department of Homeland Security. I'd like to introduce the two attorneys from our agency who had primary responsibility for the report, Lynn Alexander and Johanna Oliver, and they did a terrific job. They are attorneys in our disclosure unit. My statement today will focus on 3 areas: the role of the Office of Special Counsel in whistleblower matters generally, the procedures followed in this matter, and finally, our findings in areas of concern. I want to start by briefly explaining our role in disclosure matters. As an independent agency within the executive branch, the OSC provides a safe channel for Federal employees to disclose government wrongdoing. We evaluate disclosures using a substantial likelihood standard. If the standard is met, I send the matter to the head of the agency, who in turn is required to conduct an investigation and submit a written report of investigative findings to my office. After reviewing the agency's report, I make 2 determinations. First, whether the report contains the information required by statute, and second, whether the findings of the agency appear reasonable. In addition, the whistleblower may review and comment on the agency report. My office then transmits the report with findings and recommendations to the President and congressional committees with oversight responsibility. In this case, my findings and recommendations are attached to my submitted testimony. It was within this statutory framework that we received disclosures from 7 whistleblowers from 6 separate offices at the Department of Homeland Security over the past 2 years. In September 2012, Jose Ducas Bello contacted OSC about overtime in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner's Situation Room in Washington, D.C. Mr. Ducas Bello alleged that employees there regularly abused administratively uncontrollable overtime, AUO. The director and assistant director were authorizing this improper use, and it was the norm for employees to extend their shifts by 2 hours every day, increasing pay 25%. By regulation, this type of overtime may only be used when an employee's hours cannot be scheduled in advance due to a substantial amount of irregular and unpredictable work or a compelling law enforcement reason. For example, AUO is appropriate when an employee is apprehending a suspected criminal, and it would constitute negligence for the employee to leave the job unfinished. However, the employees in Mr. Ducas Bello's disclosure were not using AUO as the result of any unpredictable or compelling law enforcement need. According to Mr. Ducas Bello, many employees spent the extra time relaxing or surfing the Internet. The abuse was not an isolated occurrence. Over the past year, we received disclosures from 6 more whistleblowers at 5 other DHS offices. These allegations are outlined in more detail in my October 31, 2013 letter to the President. The estimated cost of abuse at these 6 facilities alone is almost $9 million each year. The whistleblowers estimate that the cost nationwide is likely to reach tens of millions of dollars annually. This estimate excludes overtime claims by agents in the field, those whose need for AUO would seem to be most justified. In April 2013, we received DHS's report on Mr. Ducas-Bello's allegations, and the report substantiated his claims. As to the other 5 investigations, DHS's reports to my agency are due within the next several weeks and months. We will keep the subcommittee informed. I credit the Customs and Border Patrol for conducting a thorough investigation into the whistleblowers' allegations. However, while CBP has pledged to take corrective action, I remain concerned about whether the agency is ultimately willing or able to do so. In 2007, identical concerns about overtime abuse were raised. DHS confirmed the allegations, and the agency made similar promises about correcting them. At that time, CBP outlined a corrective plan, much of which is mirrored in its response to the current round of allegations. In addition, in its current report, DHS describes obstacles to correcting these problems, including collective bargaining agreements and the need for updated regulations from the Office of Personnel Management. While I'm very hopeful that the Department will overcome these obstacles and take definitive action to correct this overtime abuse, I am also realistic. But based both on the magnitude of the problem and the prior history of ineffective measures taken, it will require a serious commitment to make necessary change. I am pleased that Congress and this committee have shown an interest in helping the Department find ways to solve this problem. In conclusion, I want to applaud Mr. Florence, Mr. Ducas-Bello, and the other courageous whistleblowers who spoke out about this important issue, often against their own financial self-interest. Had they not stepped forward, these problems would not have come to light, and the taxpayers would continue to foot the bill for these improper payments. Thank you very much. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. Ms. Emerson, you are now recognized.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address the Department's use of administratively uncontrollable overtime, AUO. I serve as the first career Chief Human Capital Officer of the Department of Homeland Security, and am responsible for the Department's Human Capital Program, which includes workforce planning, policies, and technology in support of the DHS mission. Today, I'm here to discuss AUO, a matter that has been of concern to the Department for some time. Properly paying our border and homeland security personnel and properly managing that pay system are essential to the Department's mission. AUO was established by Congress in 1966 and is a payment mechanism that allows the compensation of certain employees for irregular, unscheduled, but necessary overtime. AUO is determined as a percentage, not less than 10%, nor more than 25% of an employee's rate of basic pay fixed by law or administrative action for the position held by the employee. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate your taking the initiative to introduce new legislation to attempt to address the challenges posed by AUO, and welcome the opportunity to work with you on finding solutions at an affordable cost. As you know, the Department has sought legislative changes for several years that would enable CBP to reform and rationalize its compensation structure. The Department has been working to institute pay reform, including AUO, since 2009. The President's fiscal year 2011 budget request submitted in April 2010 would have fully funded that increase. That plan also required statutory changes and a comprehensive pay reform legislative proposal submitted as part of its President's fiscal year 2012 budget request and formally submitted to Congress in September 2011. Unfortunately, Congress did not take action on the proposal. The Department again restated the proposal in the President's fiscal year 2013 budget request to provide fair payment for all CBP's overtime-eligible law enforcement officers and agents. The Department takes its responsibility to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars very seriously. Any misuse of government funds will not be tolerated. At the request of the Special Counsel, on October 31, 2013, Acting Secretary Beers ordered an expeditious and comprehensive department-wide review of our compliance with rules governing the use of AUL. The Office of General Counsel is conducting the compliance review and examining both current practices relating to designating positions as eligible for AUO pay and the compliance with all applicable rules and laws in recording and paying for AUL. The Office of the Chief Human Capital Officer, CBP, and all other relevant components of DHS are working closely with OGC on the compliance review and will be integral in implementing any decisions that result from OGC's findings and recommendations to the Secretary. In conclusion, the Department and CBP are committed to finding solutions to modernize and streamline compensation structures, to align them with evolving missions, and to reflect the expanded responsibilities of our workforce. And we look forward to working with Congress to achieve these goals. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Mr. Vitello, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address the recent allegations against U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and specifically the U.S. Border Patrol. When CBP was established in 2003 in the wake of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, it was tasked with merging personnel, equipment, policies, procedures, and systems from 4 agencies within 3 departments: Treasury, Agriculture, and Justice. Today, the uniformed men and women of CBP make up the largest law enforcement organization in the nation and take a solemn vow to secure the homeland from terrorists and other threats. While much of CBP's critical efforts are performed at official ports of entry and at the land and maritime borders in between, advancements in technology are increasingly enabling aspects of frontline law enforcement activities. The responsibilities of a Border Patrol agent are arguably the most unpredictable of all CBP's law enforcement positions. While the function of the Border Patrol has changed and expanded dramatically since its inception 89 years ago, its primary mission remains unchanged. The Border Patrol protects our nation by reducing the likelihood that dangerous people and capabilities enter the United States between the ports of entry. This effort is accomplished by maintaining surveillance, following up leads, responding to electronic sensor alarms and aircraft sightings, and interpreting and following tracks. We also maintain traffic checkpoints along the highways leading from border areas, conduct city patrols and transportation checks, and support the anti-smuggling investigations. Agents regularly work in isolated and harsh terrain. Agents patrol the border on foot, in vehicles, boats, and in some areas patrol on horses, all-terrain vehicles, bikes, and snowmobiles. The Border Patrol's frontline border security efforts are increasingly augmented by investments in technology, including enhanced sensor, video, and radar technology. This technology, affixed to assets such as unmanned aircraft systems, increases the Border Patrol's capabilities in the land, air, maritime domains between the ports of entry. The vast amounts of information gathered from this technology requires review and analysis and rapid interpretation into actionable information for use by agents on the ground. The work of the Border Patrol agent is, by its very nature, dynamic and unpredictable. In the course of any given day, agents are continually presented with new conditions and new situations. This type of work requires agents both patrolling on the ground and processing intelligence at remote locations to follow leads and go where the activity takes them, even if it takes them beyond their standard duty hours. When it comes to paying Border Patrol agents for work beyond regularly scheduled hours, the Department and CBP are committed to working with Congress to modernize and streamline our compensation structure to reflect the expanded responsibilities of the workforce. Administratively uncontrollable overtime, a system established almost 50 years ago, no longer meets the needs of a 21st century law enforcement environment where increasingly amounts of surveillance, intelligence, and border security activities are often conducted in remote areas. The work of securing the border is no longer limited to physical presence on the border. and our compensation system should reflect the current operational environment. The U.S. Border Patrol takes its responsibility to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. Any misuse of government funds is not tolerated. The U.S. Border Patrol will cooperate fully with all internal DHS and external reviews of our compensation and procedures. Prior to the issuance of the Special Counsel's report, CBP initiated an internal working group on administratively uncontrollable overtime to review current practices and update internal policies where applicable to reflect the roles and responsibilities of the positions earning AUO. The Border Patrol also regularly issues official guidance on all AUO to Chief Patrol Agents in the field, most recently in December of last year. This guidance contains the regulations and policies governing the administration of AUO, criteria that agents must meet and be authorized to be deemed eligible for payments for legitimately claiming AUO, and the responsibilities required of employees, supervisors, and managers. While the Department and CBP have taken steps to educate supervisors and employees about the proper application of AUO, we continue working and educate and train our staff on the proper use and align pay structures with current agency functions. The Border Patrol's mission requires compensation structures maintain flexibility and ensure continuous coverage. We would welcome a legislative solution that meets the agency's critical mission, promotes efficiency, and has the least impact to our Border Patrol agent personnel. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Judd, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chaffetz and Ranking Member Tierney, on behalf of the 16,500 Border Patrol agents who are members of the National Border Patrol Council, I would like to thank you for having this hearing to explore reforming the administrative uncontrollable overtime system. I'm the President of the Border Patrol Council, and I have been a Border Patrol agent for 16 years. I am currently assigned in Maine, but I have worked the majority of my career in some of the busiest Border Patrol sectors, including El Centro, California, and Tucson, Arizona. The Special Counsel's latest report simply confirms what line agents have been saying for years: AUO is outdated and a broken system that needs wholesale reform. When AUO was first instituted in the 1970s, there were fewer than 4,000 Border Patrol agents. There was no border fence, remote sensing technology, or even an interoperable communication system. Most agents worked alone or in small groups with little or no supervision. AUO made sense 40 years ago because if an agent was tracking smugglers or illegal aliens after the shift was over, the agent could simply keep working. Those extra hours worked were covered under AUO. When I entered on duty with the United States Border Patrol in 1997, there were still mom-and-pop smuggling organizations who peddled their product across our borders. Fast forward to where we are today in 2013. Gone are the mom-and-pop smuggling organizations, replaced by multinational cartels that smuggle both drugs and illegal aliens into our country. These cartels are well-organized, well-funded, heavily armed, extremely violent, and have an extensive intelligence and surveillance network. With each tunnel coming into the United States that is discovered by law enforcement, the American public is made aware of just how well-funded and organized these cartels are. In response to cartel threats and the increase in both human and drug smuggling, Congress set a Border Patrol staffing floor at approximately 21,300 agents, 7 times its initial size. This level of staffing not only ensured more agents in the field, but also ensured that Border Patrol would be a 24-hour-a-day operation on all of our borders. In order to maximize manpower in the field, the Border Patrol utilizes a 3-shift rotation, with each shift lasting 8 hours. The challenge is how to handle shift changes, because it is common for an agent's patrol area to be over an hour away from the Border Patrol station. Therefore, an agent shift may be done, but the oncoming relief is still an hour away. After a handover is made with an oncoming agent, the offgoing agent still has to drive an hour back to the Border Patrol station to turn in all equipment. So while a shift may be 8 hours, the agent has to work an extra 2 hours per day to ensure border integrity. These hours are and have always been covered under AUO, which we know through the Office of Special Counsel is illegal. For the most part, when discussions on border security arise, the conversation tends to focus on the southwest border. In no way do I want to detract from the importance of securing the southwest border, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the ongoing threat of the nearly unguarded northern border to the safety of the American public. As far as I'm aware, all recent threat assessments have pointed to the northern border as the most likely point of entry into our country for terrorists. I also need to remind the committee of our recent history. In the early to mid-1990s, San Diego and El Paso were ground zero for both illegal immigration and drug smuggling. In response, the Border Patrol threw all of its resources at those 2 areas without also strengthening other areas of the border. The thought process was that no one would attempt to cross through the inhospitable deserts of Arizona. We now have a similar thought process in that we don't believe illegal smuggling, whether it be drugs or aliens, will ever move to our northern border because it is cost prohibitive. Like Arizona, the northern border is ripe for the exploitation of not only alien and drug trafficking, but also for the facilitating the illegal entrance of terrorists and those that would do this country harm. If we selectively limit manpower to current locations with high volumes of illegal crossings, all we really achieve is shifting the point of illegal entry to a different location. The real question is, where do we go from here? Last week, Chairman, you introduced legislation, H.R. 3463. In addition, Senator Testers and McCain introduced a companion bill in the Senate. The legislation would reform Border Patrol agent pay for the first time in almost 40 years. On this point, I want to be clear. Border Patrol agents completely support this legislation. The primary reason agents support this legislation is that it guarantees manpower we need in the field to accomplish our mission. I learned early in my career that manpower and agent safety are linked. It was true when I started 16 years ago. It's even more true today. With the domination and spread of sophisticated drug cartels on the border, having this legislation in place is the equivalent of hiring 5,000 new Border Patrol agents, which increases border security as well as agent safety. Finally, I would like to address the cost savings that would be achieved by the legislation. This legislation will save taxpayers over $1 billion over the next 10 years. Moving to this new system will be a pay cut from what Border Patrol agents have traditionally earned. However, we believe ensuring proper manpower stability and safety is worth a pay reduction. Chairman, I look forward to any and all questions that you might have.
Thank you. We're going to now direct our questions to Mr. Florence. I'd ask members of this panel, or here on the panel, to direct our questions just to Mr. Florence. We'll go through those questions at the conclusion, then we'll focus on the 4 that are here in Washington, D.C. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and Mr. Florence, I hope you can hear me. And I appreciate your testimony. Could you please tell me what you saw? What were these people doing day in and day out? Were they, you mentioned generally that they were surfing the internet, doing those types of things, but what specifically did you see them doing?
Well, I didn't see them doing specific things. I did not mention anything about them surfing the internet. That was Mr. Ducos out of the Situation Room. The individuals that were under my supervision worked in the Marine branch, and according to their 203s, which were their AUO forms, they were preparing for lessons for the next day, working on lesson plans, other things like that that were primarily controllable and administrative in nature. Normally here at the academies, the instructors will work anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day, and they'll have at least 2 hours of a break to do the things that they were putting down that they were doing on their AUO. Sometimes they would even have 4 hours a day to prepare for their lessons the next day and to prepare for their classes and lesson plans, etc. So it didn't make any sense to me as far as prudent management why these employees were filing the AUO they were when they had plenty of time during their shifts to accomplish their work.
Now yield to the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Lummis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Florence, thank you for your testimony. I understand that you began your law enforcement career as a law enforcement specialist at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, which is where I'm from. So I'm very pleased that you were willing to testify today. I want to focus on the kind of response that you received when you notified your colleagues about the allegations of overtime abuse. Mr. Florence, could you comment on that?
When I sent Deputy Director Brown my email, which I mentioned, which was on the 11th of September, he actually wanted to speak with me in person. He responded back by saying there was very serious allegations, et cetera, which I appreciate that, and I can understand that. But he asked me to come into his office the next day, and then he sat me down and he said that my allegations were very serious, that I was questioning the director's integrity, and did I think that he would jeopardize his career for AUO. And then he told me that you can go ahead and file your Joint Intake Center report, but I feel it's a real waste of government money and waste of government time.
Now, based on your experience working at CBP, what do you think contributes to this problem? An atmosphere or a culture where overtime is abused? Is it a lack of training, or is it just a sort of a herd mentality to think, you know, that this is somehow fair? Or the fact that, gee, we feel like we're underpaid, and until Congress addresses that, we'll find a way to make sure that we are adequately paid, whether it's legal or not. What is it about this culture that makes this so hard to eradicate?
Well, I think some of the Border Patrol agents feel it's an entitlement, it's part of their pay package. When I received the 3 employees that were Border Patrol agents under my chain of command, I quickly started to study what AUO was all about because I was unfamiliar with it. I don't claim myself as a subject matter expert on AUO in any way, shape, or form, but I know when someone should be working overtime and when they shouldn't. And in a training environment, obviously most of the 99% of it's controlled, so in my opinion it wasn't necessary. So I think it's basically the mentality, it's an entitlement, it's an AUO certified position, so therefore we can have AUO. That's what I was told by the director on numerous occasions. But in doing some research on my own on the Lyndon Washington case, and then doing the mandatory training that was set out, and then doing my own research, I quickly found it was easy to understand that this was in violation of the policy. And I explained that to them numerous times to try to get this taken care of within my chain of command.
Mr. Florence, one more question. We had testimony from Mr. Judd that can be a 2-hour commute, 1 hour each way, for a shift that is far away from the area where you must turn in your weapons and stuff before the end of a shift. Is that the typical situation where you would allege that overtime is abused, or is that an appropriate use of overtime?
Well, at the academies, as I said before, everything is controlled. They don't have to commute anywhere near that time. They're normally in their work areas, so they're able to report on time, and there's normally no commutes. Now, in the Marine environment where these 3 employees worked, I understood that there could be situations where they got stuck out at sea because of weather, or they had a mechanical issue with their vessels, etc. And I accepted that. I told them in those kind of situations, AUO should be authorized. It's uncontrollable.
Yeah.
But in the normal situations, in the academy environments, everything is controllable and scheduled in advance.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Florence. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Tierney, Massachusetts, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Florence, for making yourself available to testify here today and accept at least my regrets for what you've gone through physically and emotionally as a result of trying to do your job the proper way, and know that we respect it and appreciate it and feel very badly for the situation that you're in today health-wise. I want to make this as short as I can. My questions, I was curious to know about what kind of retaliation had confronted your subordinate, and you heard about that and you testified about that. So let me just quickly ask you, who specifically did you directly report to when you first made the determination that this was being done improperly?
I directly reported to the Deputy Director, Michael Brown, which in turn he reported to the Director, Kevin Strong, who was also an AUO earner. Michael Brown was not an AUO earner.
And did the Deputy Director have a direct response to you, directing you to either change the situation that you found or advising you to just leave it alone?
He advised me that it was an AUO certified position, that I didn't know what I was talking about, I didn't know the AUO system, and that, like I said before, the Director was not going to jeopardize his career over AUO, and it's a very serious concern of his that I'm even bringing this up.
Did you have any indication of how it was he thought he was going to be jeopardizing his career by dealing with this issue? I'm not really sure about that. I think what he was alluding to is that the
director wouldn't collect the AUO unless it was authorized and it was within policy.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions. My colleague has any questions, I'll yield. I'll yield.
No, I don't.
Okay. We'll yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Florence.
Mr. Florence, we thank you for your time, your commitment, your dedication to your country, your service. It's my understanding there are no other questions from this panel of members. We thank you again for your bravery, for your willingness to step forward and do what's right. And I hope you sleep better because of it. And I'm heartened that people like you are in those positions, and I appreciate the responsible nature. I appreciate you preparing for this testimony. Testifying before Congress is not an easy thing. And God bless you. I wish you nothing but the best. We thank you for your time. You're welcome to listen. But we'll now, this committee will now direct its questions to the 4 panel members that are here in Washington, D.C. And I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Lerner, on January 2nd of this year, you sent a letter to Secretary Napolitano. On page 3, you said, quote, "I have concluded that there is a substantial likelihood that the information provided by the whistleblower to OSC discloses a violation of law, rule, or regulation, gross mismanagement, and abuse of authority, and gross waste of funds." You stand by that statement, correct? Your microphone, please.
I do.
Ms. Emerson, is she right or is she wrong?
We are currently in the process of...
Wait. Currently in the process. This is a letter that was sent on January 2nd. It's now November 20th. Is she right or wrong?
That's currently under review by the Office of General Counsel.
How long does it take you to review this?
From what I understand, it's going to take several months.
Well, we're in month 11. How many more months do you think it's going to take?
I'll have to get back to you with that, but from my understanding, it'll take several months. I know
What is your role?
I am the Chief Human Capital
The
Officer.
Chief Human Capital. You're in charge. Who do you report to?
I report to the Undersecretary for Management.
What's his name or her name?
Presently, there is an acting. That would be Chris Kaminsky.
How long have you been in this role?
I've been the DHS Chico since August of 2011.
When did you first become aware of this problem?
My office first became aware of it somewhere in 2009, former Chico.
So you knew it was a problem in 2009.
The office worked on some
When did you
legislation.
personally, Ms. Emerson, when did you become aware of it?
I personally became aware of it. It came to my attention in late April, and
Of this year?
yes.
Do you think anybody's been dishonest?
That's under review right now by the OGC.
What's the question here? We have the Office of Special Counsel who has reviewed this and come up with a definitive report on this. What do you need to do that Ms. Lerner hasn't done?
What I understand is that Ms. Lerner had some very serious concerns regarding the administration of AUO at DHS. That report or letter was sent to the Office of General Counsel, and they are working with the component. They're also working with my office, the Office of the Chico, and reaching out to the component experts to look into the matter.
Has anybody been fired?
Regarding this, I'm not knowledgeable on that at this point. That's
You're the Chief Human Capital person. You can't point to a single person who's been fired, let go. What are you going to do to claw back the dollars?
That's under review with the Office of General Counsel.
What are you here to talk about then? Everything's under review? Who's reviewing it? Who should have been here to represent the department? Are you the chief or are you the...
I'm the Chief Human Capital Officer, and I have oversight throughout DHS for human capital programs. I am involved presently with the review being done by OGC to look at AUO administration.
No, what about the
component by
specific
component.
allegations?
Those are all being reviewed currently
When are you going to come to a conclusion?
in the next several months.
No. Give me a date. What's the date?
I'll have to get back to you on the date. I've been informed that it will be a few months.
Do you think anything that has been done has been dishonest?
As I said, I'd have to look into the facts. I know they're being reviewed right now.
This started in 2008. It was brought up again in 2009. A letter went to the Secretary on January 2nd of this year, and you're still reviewing it?
As I said, it is under review by the Office of General Counsel, and it's a case-by-case, component-by-component review of AUO usage.
Can you point to any case where we're clawing these dollars back?
I know that there has been work in that area.
You said in your testimony, the testimony that you never gave us in advance, we had trouble getting right now, you said, quote, "At the request of special counsel, on October 31st, Acting Secretary Beers ordered an expeditious and comprehensive department-wide review of our compliance and rules with the governing use of AUO." October 31st? You started a few days ago? She sent a letter to the Secretary on January 22nd saying there's a substantial likelihood that the information provided by the whistleblower discloses a violation of law, rule, regulation, gross mismanagement, abuse of authority, and a gross waste of funds, and you didn't start a review until October 31st?
That review is the component-by-component, department-wide review. That information was handled by OGC and forwarded to the Customs and Border Patrol, and they were working on those specific instances were specific to CBP.
I can tell exactly why this continues to be a problem. There are tens of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, that are being abused. They're being stolen from the American people. And you're doing nothing about it. You've known about this since 2008. It was highlighted in January, and yet nothing has been done. Don't tell me that there are months that we got to continue to review this. There are people that need to be fired. There are dollars that need to be clawed back. There are people that maybe have a violation of law that should be going to jail. So I hope we get the right person from Homeland Security to come here. This committee will hold another hearing with the right person who's actually going to testify to Congress. But don't tell me that you need more dollars, more resources. You hear Nancy Pelosi saying, oh, well, we're at bone bare, you know, the cupboard is bare, there's nothing to give. There are too many thousands of people who are working hard, doing the right thing, and guess what? They're getting screwed by the Department of Homeland Security because those people are stealing from the American people. You take that back to Homeland Security and let them know they are going to deal with Congress, they are going to be candid about this, they are going to hold people responsible, and they are going to be candid in making sure that they're responsible with the American taxpayer dollars. Your answers, quite frankly, you're a very nice person, but your answers, quite frankly, they're not acceptable. For you to be the chief human capital person, and you have no answers to any questions, saying everything's under review because, well, it's not in my department, it's with the General Counsel. It's inexcusable. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to cede to Ms. Kelly, who was here in my delay in being here, so please.
Ms. Kelly's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. Mr. Judd, your colleague, Sean Moran, the Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council, was quoted in a recent Washington Post article as stating that AUO has long been promised, advertised, and used by every single agent who's a non-supervisor. Panel members, do you agree with that statement, that collecting AUO has become a promise that employees and new hires have come to expect?
Thank you for your question. Actually, when you apply for a job, and they've since removed this in the application, but when I applied for the job, it was actually a part of the compensation package that you were told that you would earn. It said that you would earn a substantial amount of irregular overtime in the form of administrative uncontrollable overtime. So yes, all Border Patrol agents prior to, I believe that it was removed from the job announcement about a year ago, but prior to a year ago, yes, all Border Patrol agents were told that this was part of your compensation package.
Is it true that it has been used as an actual recruitment incentive?
It has. It absolutely has.
And I think it was said that a person can earn up to 25% of their salary for AUO.
That is correct.
That's a very strong recruitment incentive, don't
you
think? Okay. Panel members, do you agree that it would be a challenge to implement any fix to the AUO system that would reduce or eliminate the AUO premium that employees have been earning?
I think the findings in the investigation and the work that we've done has shown that this has been a very difficult challenge for us. That's why we look forward to working with the committee and others to get us into a space where we can put these kinds of things behind us.
Anyone else? Okay. Panel members, if we eliminate AUO for all employees not working on the front lines protecting the border, would it be difficult to retain and recruit employees to work at headquarters or at the department's training facilities? And how would we recruit and retain these folks if you think it would be a hard time?
Congresswoman Kelly, if you remove the overtime system that we currently had, you wouldn't be able to retain employees. That's one of the biggest incentives that we have to do the job that we do. We live in environments, if you go out to Sanderson, Presidio, Texas, Ajo, Arizona, we live in environments that just aren't where the normal United States citizen would choose to live. What we've noticed is that, yes, AUO, by law, Ms. Lerner has pointed it out, by law, AUO is not being used correctly. However, we do have a fix for that, which would actually save the taxpayers' dollars, and it would increase border security.
Do you feel the starting salary or however your salary progresses is so low that it's hard to recruit people?
No, our salary, when I began 16 years ago, our salary was extremely low compared to other police departments, major police departments. However, our salary is now on par with those police departments. But every police department in the United States has an overtime system, which they use. And just like those overtime systems, we also need an overtime system. But we need an overtime system that will be cost-effective to the taxpayer, increase border security, and include incentives to retain our employees.
Okay. Any other comments? I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Lummis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Emerson, you have a marvelous mastery of bureaucratese. But let me tell you what I heard when you were giving your testimony. I want to paraphrase what I thought I heard you say. You said, unless Congress does what DHS wants with regard to giving us money, that we're going to keep cheating the taxpayers to get it unless Congress will give us more money. That's what I heard you say. Am I correct?
AUO has been a challenge for the Department over the last years, as we've seen, as pointed out in testimony here today and with the Office of Special Counsel. And over the years, there have been...
No. Okay. And this is something that somebody has taught you how to do when you're testifying in front of Congress, which is stray, obfuscate, use bureaucratese. So let me just ask you a question again. When you testified, were you saying that unless Congress gives us more money, we're going to cheat the system? That's what I thought I heard you say. And did I hear wrong? Yes or no? Did I hear wrong? Yes or no? Did I hear wrong?
Yes.
Okay. What did you mean to say? What did you mean to say?
That AUO has been a challenge over the years.
Oh, now, come on. What did you mean to say when you said Congress isn't giving us the amount of money the President requested? And so the AUO challenge will continue until Congress gives us more money. That's what I heard you say.
It's not in regards to the money, it's in regards to the legislation that's been proposed over the years. And I appreciate the current draft legislation that has been introduced. It's certainly an attempt to look at our AUO situation and to find
okay, so until Congress passes legislation that will reform the AUO, you will continue to cheat the system. Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
Okay.
And also...
What am I hearing? Why?
The allegations, the report from the OSC is currently under review by OGC.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Lerner, obviously, I'm going to have to go and ask you these questions because I can't get a non-bureaucratic answer out of the department. So is that what you're hearing from the department? That there will be no reforms until Congress changes the law?
No, I can't say that's a message that we've gotten.
What is the message you're getting?
I mean, for the most part, I mean, the only report we've gotten back now is on the Dukas Bella matter, and that report from Internal Affairs confirmed the allegations and said that they would take steps to solve the problem. Now, my concern with that report is it was in many ways cut and pasted from the same report that they gave us 5 years ago. And the obstacles that they cite to being able to implement reform, I can't really speak to those. They say that they have collective bargaining agreement issues.
Let's explore that one. Yeah, let's explore the collective bargaining agreement.
I'm not really sure that I can add much to that because I'm not familiar with those obstacles that they have cited.
If we wanted to explore whether somehow the taxpayers are being cheated because of a collective bargaining agreement that is negotiated between the government and the union on behalf of its members, then we've got a problem.
Let me add something to this conversation, which is that there are probably a very wide variety of overtime uses here that we're talking about. Some of them may in fact be fraudulent, right? There may be people who are claiming overtime when they're actually not working or not even on the job or surfing the Internet. There may be folks who are actually working overtime in a legitimate way.
Right.
And it's really, really hard to know the extent of the overtime. What I can tell you is that at least in 3 of the cases that we have, they are at headquarters positions where there shouldn't be a need to be taking this particular type of overtime, where people are doing training, where they're primarily desk jobs. It doesn't mean that folks aren't using AUO in an appropriate way in other places, but it is a systemic problem, and it needs to be looked at department-wide. And so I take some solace in the fact that they are doing this review, that they do seem serious. And I think Congress's interest is going to help spur, a remedy.
Thank you.
And that may make the difference this time.
Yeah, and thank you all. I know that this is hard. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman. Will now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, the ranking member, Mr. Tierney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Look, some of this just needs plain English and direct talk on that. But Ms. Emerson and Mr. Vitello, I noticed that we didn't get your testimony before this hearing, which is totally unhelpful. So I won't make you name your legislative liaison with Congress now and embarrass them unduly, because I know it's not all your fault. But I think you might take this back to the department or whatever. Next time, there will be a joint effort to make sure there's some repercussions for people not cooperating. It's just indicative of how late it's been to respond to this issue since January, all the way through. But you should know that if we ask for something, we're going to have a hearing. It's a courtesy to you to give you advance notice. You owe us the courtesy back to give us the advance testimony so we can properly prepare. Mr. Judd, when did you first go to work for the agency?
September of 1997.
So in 1997, you were basically induced into your situation by knowing that you're going to get your base pay plus up to 25% on that, because that was part of the package that they told you about when you were employed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So we've had this problem now through 3 administrations. So it's not political. This is a systemic problem, and this has been ongoing. And if the agents are perceived to not being paid enough for a salary or whatever, why has it never been a case somebody comes to Congress in the appropriations process and just says, in order to recruit people, we've got to pay them X amount of dollars, more than we're paying now, or we'll have a serious recruitment problem? Anybody want to tackle that one?
I would like to be a little precise on, as it relates to recruitment and job announcements, the idea that the work is unpredictable and that will exceed regular shift hours has to be advertised so that we're truthful and we're attracting people who recognize that.
I'm going to just have a colloquy with you. I hope you don't take it as interrupting. But yes, I understand that, but this is a representation that people are saying was made, not that you're going to have irregular hours, but basically you can count on 25% extra pay. Well, and that's just not the best way to do business. I think you can agree on that.
I agree. We need to be more precise, but the object of those words in the recruitment announcements is to put folks on notice that the work is irregular and unpredictable.
Right. And the result has been that everybody's been led to believe that it's automatic and that there's their pay plus 25% more.
Well, the
and
findings.
that's why I'm going to work for that agency, because I'm really not going to get paid the base that they're talking about. I'm going to get paid 25% more than that. That's what we have to attack. I appreciate Mr. Chaffetz's legislation. We're going to review it thoroughly, but I'm hoping we're not legalizing an already bad situation, and that if there's an adjustment that has to be made in compensation in order to make sure that we get the recruitment we need, that's how we ought to address it. Is that statute 3463 the best way, or is there some other way that we ought to be doing it? But we've got to start having some directness and honesty in advertising here and bringing people on board so that we have an expectation when budgets are being done as to what we're going to meet in that obligation. Ms. Emerson, I appreciate that they send you out here as a sacrificial lamb and they put you in a difficult position. We really would like to get somebody who is responsible for that department, if there is anybody that's willing to accept responsibility. But the real problem seems to be when given specific instances of abuse, the agency sets off on a broad scope investigation of the process, which is fine. As Ms. Lerner says, it's well overdue. But who's dealing with the specific investigations into those incidents that were reported and the retaliation that occurred? Is there a bifurcation of those investigations?
It's my understanding that those allegations are being, I know they're being looked at through the Office of General Counsel in the department-wide review, but they are also being handled because they are component-specific by CBP.
Okay. Would you have the department provide to this committee the exact status on each aspect of those investigations, the component ones and the individuals involved, and the broad? We want to write where it is. We're not going to wait months if we can help it. We'd like to know to this day, where's that investigation? What have you found so far? What's left to be done on that investigation? By whom? All right, and who's the ultimate responsible person for bringing this home to a final date? And that would be very helpful. Will you do that, please? Okay. Is there anybody, Mr. Vitello, Ms. Emerson, is there anybody in the department responsible for reviewing the general way that we pay people, other than this wide review of AUO, to come to Congress with a recommendation that perhaps we ought to have an entirely new payment system for people so that, we get away from things that are ambiguous like the AUO, all of those things, to get to a payment system where people can expect how it is they're going to get paid and know how that's going to go? Is anybody doing that kind of a review?
So I think the work that we did post the 2008 findings led us to try to structure, train, and do better with the layers of management that review these time and how it's claimed, but was also recognized at CBP that a legislative fix was in order, that we wanted to structurally reform the system to give us the flexibility to change the compensation system to meet the mission in a better way.
Well, I think we have to look at, A, one alternative is how you might restructure AUO, 2, whether you ought to replace it with something else, and 3, how is it being used in the recruitment of people? What specifically is being said by inference or directly? And if I can ask one further question, Mr. Chairman, have your indulgence in that. Mr. Judd, these individuals against whom the complaints were originally alleged, the people that were at the academy, for instance, that really aren't out in the field and don't have that problem of traveling back and forth or whatever, what is your organization doing with respect to those individuals?
Those individuals are management officials. Therefore, I have no contact with them.
They're not part of your group?
No, they're not.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. Now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, 5 minutes.
Hate to say it, kind of like Obamacare, but sort of same with DHS. I told you so. Gave a speech in this committee when we created Department of Homeland Security, and I said, whoever thinks that bringing 22 agencies together and over 200,000 people would be more efficiently operated is dreaming. most of you, Ms. Emerson,
Okay, but people may not work 100 hours, and they just take the...
do we still have over 200,000 in DHS?
Legalizing that is my concern, is that-
Yes, from what I understand, we have approximately 230,000 employees at DHS, and as you said, it's the third largest federal agency.
And they got 66,000 in TSA, probably close to 60,000. Coast Guard, how many in Customs and Border Patrol now?
Approximately 65,000.
65,000, okay. And for the most part, you guys do a pretty good job. I commend you, some tough assignments. But it is tough to manage that many people. You do a pretty thorough job, you think, reviewing the qualifications of folks before you hire them, Ms. Emerson?
At DHS as a whole?
Yeah. Well,
I would say each component.
not HOLE, but WHOLE. Go ahead.
Yeah. As a whole, yes, I would say so. Each component has their own HR operational organization.
Okay. So Customs and Border Patrol, the 65,000, they would review those folks. I ask that because I'm not sure some of these people are properly vetted. But you would make a decision, for example, if people are put on administrative leave for some violation, whether they continue to get paid. Would you make that decision?
That would be handled by the component.
Okay. Well, what troubles me is, the subject of this hearing is, again, some abuses and overtime and some other payments. I'm concerned that DHS still hasn't fired, I've got a headline here, a black supremacist who called for mass murder of whites. There's an employee who was a Customs and, let's see, his title was Immigration and Customs Enforcement Officer. Are you familiar with this case at all? It's a gentleman by the name of Kimathi, Mr. Vitale or Ms. Emerson?
Not specifically. I've seen the media accounts of it as well.
Well, I'm wondering if you have the authority. I mean, this guy, when you get a report of some misconduct or a question, how long does it take to move forward in investigating it?
So we take all allegations of misconduct seriously.
Especially in enforcement, right?
Correct. Correct.
I'm told that there were complaints as of 2011, since 2011. In fact, one of his supervisors says everybody in the office is afraid of him, and he wasn't suspended until August of this year. You're not aware of that case?
I have no direct knowledge.
Could you let us know about that? Is that customary to take 2 years before someone's suspended? Some of the things he did here on his website, he said in order for black people to survive in the 21st century, we're going to have to kill a lot of whites. He said that whites and their enablers, this is from his website, like President Obama, are trying to homosexualize black men in order to make them weaker. And he went on with other hate things against Zionists and others. This is an enforcement officer of, again, your agency.
No, it's not. That is not a CBP employee.
It isn't?
It's not.
A Homeland Security, then?
That employee works for ICE, but Homeland Security, yes,
Under
correct.
DHS. Are
Yes,
you
sir.
aware of it?
Yes, sir.
Do you have the tools? Now, this guy's, what's frosting people is this guy's still getting paid. He's getting a salary. His salary is $115,731. Do you have the authority to suspend pay? Does it take 2 years when employees report misconduct or this kind of activity to put someone on administrative leave? Can you answer, Ms. Emerson?
From my understanding, and I've also seen some reference of it in the media, that case is being handled by ICE, their HR shop, and also their Office of General
But that's under you.
Counsel.
Can you report, my time's about up, can you report back to the committee? Again, I don't have to get, I know you don't want to get specific with the personnel and an issue with an individual, but I want to know if you have why it took so long, again, from August 2 years ago in 11 to September, I guess it was, or August, 2 years. Then when they're put on administrative leave and you've got this kind of record, and that particular position, why someone cannot be terminated, their pay, and if you don't have the authority, what it would take that we could do to hold these people responsible. That's an important position, and DHS is an important role. And again, I get these complaints from my constituents, and the media report, and the public is outraged. So I'd appreciate your responding to us. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Spear, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, this is very reminiscent of a hearing that I chaired when I was in the State Senate in California, when the correctional guards were playing a similar game, which was one in which they would call in sick one day, and a friend would work overtime, and then the following week, the friend would call in sick, and the colleague would work overtime. This is outrageous. And Ms. Lerner, you pointed in your comments that this is not just an isolated incident, that in fact there have been 7 whistleblowers at 6 facilities within the department that have complained specifically about AUO. Is that correct?
That's right. We don't know how big a problem this is.
Well, I can tell you right now, it's big. If you've already heard from 6 offices, I can guarantee you that it is a wink and a nod, and it's something that's going on throughout the department, and it's got to stop. Now, you mentioned in your comments that you are unclear about whether or not the agency is ultimately willing or able to make the corrective actions. Can you explain that to us?
Well,
why you think they're unwilling?
The track record, you know, the 5-year-long notice that they've had. This is not a new issue that's come to their attention for the first time. I think the difference this time, though, may be having congressional interest.
Right. Sometimes that always.
And so I really want to thank this committee for its interest in this important issue.
So my concern are the whistleblowers who come forward, who then go through physical health deterioration because they had the guts to come forward, and as Mr. Florence exhibited today, had a very difficult time even reading his comments. So I think it's imperative, and I say this to all of you representing the department, this has got to be fixed. Human beings who come forward and make points like this that show that there is abuse need to be heard, and the issue needs to be resolved. And if, in fact, it's not going to be resolved internally, then Congress will take steps. So my first question to those of you within the department is, we all recognize that AUO is got to be fixed. The question is whether or not you can do it internally, or do we need congressional action to do it? So I guess to Ms. Emerson and Mr. Vitiello, do you have any thoughts on the legislation that's been introduced by Chairman Chaffetz, and whether or not it's workable, or whether or not you could support it?
We look forward to working with yourself and others in the committee and the Chairman to give a full analysis that would look at all the aspects of it, and could comment more fully in support.
Well, have you looked at the bill?
I have seen it.
And what do you think of it?
I think it allows for an ability to meet the mission much like we can now, the flexibility to assign, and then availability to flex beyond the scheduled shift. Yes.
Mr. Vitiello, were you aware of the abuse of AUO before it was brought to the attention of the department by the whistleblower?
This has actually been a challenge for CBP and the Border Patrol for quite some time.
Okay. So you knew about it, but didn't fix it.
Well, I'd like to separate what is termed as abuse. Misconduct by employees, people who are claiming hours that they don't work, or doing things at work that are inconsistent with a mission, is recognized as misconduct and is referred to authorities for investigation and a follow-up. We do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, but that's different, because this is a ruse that's created, correct?
We've looked at AUO structurally, and we've tried to improve training. We've tried to improve awareness. We've issued guidance to the field and to our offices to better manage it and monitor it. We've taken steps, in fact, this year to reduce the amount, the costs in it, but yet we still are challenged, and the findings suggest that we still have a lot more work to do.
Ms. Emerson, let's presume that the bill passes and gets signed into law. What do you think the effect will be within the Department?
Well, currently within the Department, we're reviewing that to look at it to make sure that it's fiscally sound so that, it's not costing additional sums. We wouldn't have to increase our budget.
How can it cost additional sums if you're going to restrict the amount of AUO?
Well, there's experts in the Department who are looking at that. I've read it, but I'm not an expert in that area in terms of the monetary issue. But
all right, Mr. Judd, you're shaking your head. Would you like to comment?
Yes, I would. What we're offering, what this bill is offering, right now you're getting an hour and a half of work out of agents on the border to secure the border that it's broken. The border is broken. What we're giving you is we're giving you 2 hours for the same pay that you're getting for an hour and a half. That is fiscally responsible, and for anybody to say that it's not and that it needs to be reviewed is outrageous. It's an outrageous claim. Okay, this is fiscally responsible. It saves $1 billion over what we've previously done in the past, and frankly, I'm asking you for a pay cut. I'm coming to you and I'm telling you agents are willing to take a pay cut to better secure the border. We're not talking about AUO abuses amongst frontline agents. We're talking about AUO abuses amongst management. And even though we're talking about AUO abuses amongst management, we're coming to you and saying, look, we'll fix the problem that management created. We'll give you the fix, and the fix is there, and it saves the taxpayers money, and it secures the border. I don't understand how the administration can possibly say that we have to review this when they've proposed similar, in appropriations, similar measures, and now all of a sudden we have to review it? I don't understand.
Well, I think there are others here that disagree with you, Mr. Judd. My time's expired.
Thank you. Now I'll recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Emerson, you're an attorney, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm a simple-minded person who tries to assign commonly understood definitions to words. What does the word uncontrollable mean to you?
That would mean that it would be unscheduled.
So uncontrollable means unscheduled. So I could not schedule to write a report after hours, and that would count as uncontrollable? Is that your testimony?
It would depend on the situation.
How about a report that has no deadline whatsoever?
Again, it would depend on the situation.
Well, how in the world does that depend on the situation? If there's no deadline, how is it uncontrollable? Why can't you do it the next day during your normal working hours?
That's possible.
Possible? Possible? How about watching movies? Is that controllable?
As was referenced earlier, that would be seen most likely as misconduct and would be handled separately.
Most likely. How about watching television? Is that controllable?
It would depend on the situation.
Depend on the show or depend on the situation?
It would depend on the situation.
Well, Ms. Emerson, most folks don't go into law enforcement for the money. It's an incredibly difficult job that takes its toll on every single aspect of life. So they don't go into it for the money, they don't go into it for the easy hours or the prestige. And it's for that reason and many others that I have a tremendous amount of respect for the women and men in law enforcement. It's an incredibly hard job. But people who live under the laws fully expect those who execute and enforce the laws to abide by them. And your definition of uncontrollable would make a law school professor blush. Watching television is not uncontrollable. Watching movies is not uncontrollable. Writing reports with no deadline is not uncontrollable. Do your agents ever testify in court hearings? Ms. Emerson? If you need,
Yes.
would you rather me ask the agent? Do you ever testify in court hearings?
I have.
Do you ever swear out search warrants or arrest warrants?
I've provided affidavits for that purpose.
Right, and an affidavit is under oath, right?
Correct.
You ever testify before a grand jury?
I have.
You ever testify in sentencing hearings?
I don't believe so.
But your agents could,
Yes.
right? And the common theme in all of that is the credibility of the agent, right?
Correct.
Do you agree that acts of deceit or dishonesty or fraud can be used to impeach the credibility of a law enforcement agent?
I do.
In fact, it often is, right?
Correct.
And so when you're in front of a jury and you're testifying that you witnessed X, Y, or Z happen, and your credibility is being attacked because you committed what some might conclude to be an act of dishonesty, that hurts the entire cause of law enforcement, doesn't it?
It does.
Do you agree with Ms. Emerson's definition of uncontrollable?
I think that there are situations within the work that require agents to flex beyond their shift. What was pointed out in the findings and what CBP agreed needed to be worked on were these allegations of misuse of time, whether within AUO or without it. And so we have taken that to heart. Those matters will be referred to the Internal Affairs investigative process and then dealt with appropriately after.
Well, I say this with all due respect as somebody who is crazy about law enforcement and respects the women and men that go into it. Once you lose your credibility, it is almost impossible to get it back. There was a German philosopher that I think the chairman is a fan of, Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "I'm not mad that you lied to me. I'm mad that I can't believe anything else you ever tell me." So deceit and dishonesty matters, and it impacts your ability to do your job, and the women and men who also wear uniforms, whether it's a municipal police officer or a DEA agent. So I hope this gets fixed, and I hope it gets fixed real soon, and I hope the definition of uncontrollable becomes something that the jury, the American people, can understand, because watching TV and watching movies and writing reports with no deadline doesn't fit that definition. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for calling this meeting. And I read a recent Washington Post article about the misuse of administratively uncontrollable overtime at the Department of Homeland Security, and I'd like unanimous consent to place it in the record. And I'd like to follow up with a little bipartisan support for Mr. Gowdy's statements and ask Special Counsel Lerner, in your report, you questioned, as he did, the ability and willingness of the Department to address the AUO problem. And can you explain for us the reasoning underlying your concern? Roughly 89% of those workers in the Situation Room were claiming overtime, yet they were watching movies. Could you elaborate, Ms. Lerner, on your concerns?
Sure. I mean, the extent of the problem certainly goes to my concern about solving the problem, because it is so widespread. We know that there are 22,000 Border Patrol agents in CBP alone who are AUO eligible. We know that there's $500 million in overtime at CBP alone. If even a fraction of that amount is improper, we're talking about a huge amount of money in the budget. So it's a widespread problem, but I also want to emphasize that it's a problem along a continuum, I think. Based on the information that we have now, there may in fact be some fraudulent use of overtime where folks are claiming it who are not in fact working at all. There may be people who are working but not doing AUO certified activities. And just so the record is clear, the regulations are very, very clear about the definition of what irregular, or what type of work is qualified for AUO. It has to be irregular and occasional circumstances where, for example, the failure to stay on duty would equal negligence. So we don't have to guess at what the regulations are intending for this type of overtime. It's very clear. And, I think it's terrific that this committee is focused on this, and I think that the statements from DHS have been positive in terms of recognizing the problem. Lots of times we get reports back from agencies that don't even admit that there is a problem, so I'm hopeful that that will lead to change, but I think that it is an entrenched problem, it is a widespread problem, and it is part of the culture, and it's probably going to take some sort of change in the law to solve it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, but basically you're saying that they could take steps right now to address it. They could right now crack down on those areas that are clearly not eligible. As he mentioned, putting off the time for your reports, movies, sitting there. It's really, given the problems that we have in our budget with sequestration and others, it's something that we could address already in the agencies. And, we've run through it. I just would like to ask all the panelists to put in writing, Ms. Emerson and Vitrello and Judd, what you're already doing right now to address it and get it back to the committee to review as we proceed to go forward. But I want to focus on one of the whistleblowers who was aware of these abuses for years, but then he really began to be concerned after sequestration kicked in and was implemented this year. And this particular person was worried that employees were losing work and important programs were being cut while other employees were watching television and continuing to get this $500 million that you're talking about and to receive improper AUO payments, which is outrageous. So I'd like to ask Ms. Emerson and Mr. Vitiello, as you know, sequestration was implemented this year, and current budget talks are literally underway right now for the coming years, the 2014 and 15. And there we are also looking at alternatives to replace sequestration. But if Congress does not replace sequestration cuts, further cuts will be imposed on agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, for fiscal year 2013. And CPP was able to avoid furloughs, but are you concerned that the Department may have to furlough employees and cut important programs while AUO continues to be routinely used and authorized for administrative tasks, as the whistleblower pointed out? And why aren't you cracking down on these abusive practices of AUO? Ms. Emerson and Mr. Vitrella?
So the allegations of misconduct or the misuse of the funding is being investigated by Internal Affairs. There's a process for that, and that will be dealt with appropriately. As it relates to the budget, most of the AUO that's used by the Border Patrol in that account is used in the field. Very little of it is used at headquarters. And we are are in the middle of reviewing CBP-wide, and then the Secretary has ordered review for the Office of General Counsel across the Department. Once those reviews are complete, we at CBP can rewrite the directives and issue different or change the instructions to make them more applicable.
Yeah, okay. Well, as I understand that during sequestration, CBP originally considered eliminating all AUO and ended up cutting back on the amount of AUO. Can you tell us why and how that decision was made?
So that when we did the planning for the budget, one of the planning scenarios was to decertify AUO, and AUO earning employees did in fact get a potential decertification letter. We were able to make significant cuts in other areas, including overtime, to avoid both furloughs and decertification.
Thank you. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes as we start another round, and then we'll turn the chair over to Mr. Bentivolio. Ms. Emerson, how many people within your department? Like you're the one that you're responsible for, human capital. How many people? How many people in your department?
In the department?
Yes.
There's approximately 230,000 employees.
But how many within your?
In OCHICO, in the
Yeah.
Office of the Chief Human Capital Officer, approximately 210.
210. And how many attorneys does Homeland Security have?
I'm not sure. I am an attorney, but I am not acting as an attorney for the Department of Homeland Security. So let me just clarify with that question. I am not acting as an attorney for DHS.
Ms. Lerner, how many people within the Office of Special Counsel did you have working on this?
Well, you're looking at the main one right here.
Yes.
And, we have only about 8 people in our disclosure unit.
Okay, so you have 8 people. You have 230,000. You have a couple hundred that you're responsible for. There are undoubtedly hundreds, if maybe not 1,000+ attorneys. These women right here were able to figure this out pretty short order. They focused on it. Focus determines reality. Ms. Lerner, tell me about the Situation Room. One of the highlights here is the Situation Room in Washington, D.C. What is it?
Yeah.
How many employees are we talking about? What happens there in the Situation Room?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I don't remember offhand how many employees. It's not a huge office. I think it's under 100. But we know that about 90% of the time, people were taking 2 hours of AUO who worked in the Situation Room.
Every day?
Every day, yeah. Well, about 90% of the time. So
90% of the time, the people working in the Situation Room. Now, the Situation Room connotates it's fairly important, correct? What were they doing when they took an extra 2 hours?
Well, Mr. Ducas-Bello, who is the whistleblower from the Situation Room, alleged that he observed people watching TV, being on the Internet, relaxing, and that was why he felt so compelled to come forward. He felt that there was a real waste. Now,
And you fairly quickly,
on the continuum, that would be.
You fairly quickly were. How long did it take you to come to that conclusion that this was indeed a valid allegation?
What we look at, again, is the substantial likelihood of the allegations. And before we make a referral to the agency, we do a review of the whistleblower's allegations.
But you substantiated it.
We don't actually substantiate them. It has to meet that threshold, and we decided that Mr. Ducas-Bello's allegations met that threshold for referral to the agency for investigation, and that probably took us a couple of months.
And they came back and actually confirmed it.
They did come back and confirm it. Yep.
So now that they've confirmed it, the allegation was made, it was investigated by the Office of Special Counsel. Has anybody been fired, Ms. Emerson?
That's being handled by the component. That's not handled by my office.
Who's the component?
The component is the Border Patrol.
So what's your responsibility here? I mean, if you're the chief human capital and you've got allegations of fraud, misuse of dollars, potentially criminal or a potential breaking of the law, you just wash your hands of it?
Well, actually, I'm involved in the department-wide.
But not.
But
here we go. We're in this circle again. Let's go back to what Mr. Gowdy was talking about. There's valid use of AUO, and there's an abuse of AUO. Explain to me in your own words what an abuse of AUO is.
well, some of the things that we heard about and we saw in Ms. Lerner's reports could very well include employee misconduct. And in those instances,
Well, explain to me what would employee misconduct. Give me some examples. Give me a definition of what a misuse of AUO would be.
well, from what I'm understanding, those are currently under investigation.
No.
by-
We're not investigating the definition. We've given you weeks' notice, in fact, years' notice, that this is an issue. You're highlighting and confirming this committee's concern, and that is that you haven't taken it seriously. What is the definition of AUO, and what is the definition of an abuse of AUO?
The definitions provided by in the government-wide regs and in the laws, 5 U.S.C. Speaks on it, as does the implementing regulations 5 CFR 550, and it sets out the definition for AUO.
And what's the consequence if you violate the AUO?
In terms of employee misconduct, that is handled by the component.
What is, so they have full discretion?
That could
They
lead
just
to,
give a wink and a nod and let it keep happening?
that could lead to disciplinary action,
Which could be what?
up to and including removal from Federal service.
Has that ever happened?
I would defer to the Border Patrol for that.
I mean, AUO is, we have other departments and agencies too. Are there any sort of investigation happening from your department or the Department of Homeland Security and other, we were focused on CBP here, any others that you're investigating for abuse of overtime?
In the department-wide review, we're looking at the department component by component policies and procedures for AUO. It is a department-wide review, including—
I'm going to ask one more time as I conclude here. What is an abuse of the AUO?
The abuse of the AUO in terms of employee misconduct could be a number of issues, some of which may be spelled out in the OSC reports, but those are currently being investigated, and they would be handled by the
You can't seem to answer that
component.
question, can you? Defining an abuse of the AUO. And one more time. Don't tell me it's being reviewed. What would constitute an abuse of the AUO?
It would depend on the situation. It really would.
This is unbelievable and unbearable, and it is a total lack of leadership throughout the department and agency. I yield back my time and recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney.
Mr. Emerson, let me see if I can help you out a little bit. Ms. Lerner's group found that there was a reasonable belief that the allegations were accurate. I should maybe ask Ms. Lerner that. Is that your standard?
Substantial likelihood, but
Substantial
it's all the
likelihood.
same.
So Ms. Lerner found there was a substantial likelihood. Now it's up for your people to determine whether or not it actually happened, right? She sends it to you as finding that there's a substantial likelihood it happened. Your group then has to determine whether or not it did happen.
It actually goes to the Office of General Counsel. That's not my group.
Okay.
The Office of General Counsel is actually the one that receives the Office of Special Counsel reports, and they usually share that information with the IG, and then they deal with the component regarding the issue. So those issues specifically do not come to my office. We have been tasked, because it is department-wide review of AUO throughout the department, component by component. My office has been asked to assist in that matter, but the actual discipline of any employees from that goes to the component.
All right. So as unusual as it may seem to us, the fact that you're the chief officer here has nothing to do with discipline or violations or anything like that. You're strictly policy. Is that the deal?
We have oversight, and certainly if a component came to us to ask for advice and guidance, or if we are directed to handle a situation involving a disciplinary action.
All right, but you don't check to see whether or not they've properly handled it? You don't ever take responsibility to make sure that each component actually does its work?
Only if requested.
Request from who?
For leadership, for example.
All right, so please, so it goes to somebody else, and they're responsible for it, and you have nothing to do with it after that. Even though you're the chief officer of this thing, you never, ever take it a personal responsibility without being requested from somebody else to see whether or not there was a continuing investigation that came to a conclusion with actions taken as a result of that conclusion.
In this situation,
In
with
any
AUO,
situation.
it depends on the situation.
Forget it. Forget it. I was trying to help you out, and beyond help. All right, beyond help, disturbingly so. So now we have the Internal Affairs for CBP, Mr. Vitella. Do they have a role here? They're the ones that are responsible for investigating those specific referrals from special counsel, am I correct? Okay. 50% of their employees, 50% of their employees receive AOU.
In the Internal Affairs?
Yeah.
Correct.
We have a conflict of interest problem there?
I don't believe so.
Why not?
Well, that's the compensation system that was available when those positions were filled and people were hired for them.
Yeah, but I'm hearing from Mr. Judd that back, if it was 1996 at least, it seems that, everybody sort of was in on the game here. And so are they going to start looking at this thing saying, well, it's the game, everybody's in on it, we take advantage of it, they take advantage of it, that may color the way they proceed, no?
I don't believe so.
It's about $22,000 per employee per year on this system. And you don't think that they're going to have some loss of objectivity from the fact that they're all in on the process that allows this to happen?
They're responsible to claim the hours that they work, and the nature of their work sometimes exceeds a regularly
Well,
scheduled.
the nature of everybody's work sometimes exceeds it, but we've found abuse here, and some of the abuse we found out is policy almost, the fact that people are encouraged to do it, so that they would be there, so whatever. I mean, I just have a problem. I think you ought to have a problem with it. I hope somebody in the department takes that into account when they're looking at that. Ms. Lerner, do you have a problem with that?
I mean, I think the problem is that there are folks who are at headquarters offices who are not, on the border, who are taking this leave. But we also have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If there are folks who are actually legitimately taking or using AUL, by all means. But it seems that there needs to be a real effort on the part of DHS to figure that out. And you could put a stop to it right away just by saying anyone who's not working on an irregular or,
Well, make them interpret the statute. I guess that's the problem here. We have this ongoing general review about whether or not the whole system works, but then it seems to me nobody's saying, like, look, from this day forward, no matter what the understanding was that Mr. Judd referred to that's been going on as a wink and a blink, and this is an extra 25% for everybody on that, whatever that is, somebody ought to come down with an affirmative policy statement that says from this day forward, we're going to interpret this law very, very strictly, as Mr. Gowdy was putting forward. We all know what uncontrollable is. And so from this day forward, whatever the deal was before, it's over. And now, while we're doing our overall policy, that's going to be the implementation.
If I could just add,
Sure.
there are 5 more reports that are due to us, and we may have more information from the agency when we get those reports about what remedial efforts they are taking. Okay. So maybe we'll get more answers shortly.
Wishful thinking. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. I'm listening to you, Mrs. Emerson, and and Mr. Attorney is trying to give you all the help you need. And I just have you said you were an attorney?
I have a JD, member of the bar, but in my capacity as Chico, I am not an attorney, and I don't have attorneys who work for me in my organization, the Office of the Chico.
I understand. Let me ask you a question. A Border Patrolman arrests somebody within an hour of their end of their shift. They have to drive a distance to process the criminal or the person. And they take about an hour and a half beyond their shift to complete that. Is that fair overtime?
I'd like to defer to the Border Patrol.
It's a very simple question. He's in the process of doing his job, which is to protect the border, him or her. And they have to process somebody, and they go into an hour and a half of overtime. In your opinion, is that legitimate overtime?
It sounds like it would be.
Very, very simple. It is, beyond a reasonable doubt. I have never worked Border Patrol. I know what responsible and necessary overtime. If he's processing and doing his job and he needs that additional hour and a half, it's legitimate overtime. Would you agree, sir?
I would.
Okay. Another officer, end of his shift, he's not processing, he's not doing anything, but he wants to put in overtime. And so he goes on the Internet, does something, maybe checks his personal email or falls asleep. And I think I even read that in one of these reports. Legitimate overtime or not?
No.
Okay. You're an attorney or have attorney training. You ever heard of the term plausibly state, boldly assert?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Have you ever heard the term or phrase, plausibly state, boldly assert?
No, sir.
Okay. It's a lawyer thing, isn't it? You a lawyer, Mr. Attorney? Yeah. You've heard that before? Yeah. Is it within your authority to notify when you hear somebody is abusing their overtime to send a letter to the Border Patrol or some other agency that comes under your jurisdiction outlining those problems or situations, put them on notice, plausibly state?
If it came to my attention, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I've got the impression that quite a few of these concerns came to your attention.
Actually, they go, because they're coming from OSC, they go to the Office of the General Counsel, who then shares it with OIG, the Office of Inspector General, and then they usually reach out to the component where the alleged act occurred. I'm involved in this situation because it involves department-wide review of AUO, component by component.
Okay, so individually, you don't deal with individual issues?
Usually, it depends on what the issue is, but when it's from the Office of
Abuses
Special
of
Counsel-
overtime, blatant disregard for the ethics of overtime. And I believe you have training in that, don't you, Mr. Vitello? And I think I read since 2007 you train your staff on ethics and what abuses of overtime are and are not, correct?
There was specific training issued after the 2008 findings.
But it's not working, or it is?
Well, the findings indicate that we still have a lot of work to do, that the training in and of itself isn't sufficient. That's why the internal review that's being conducted in CBP specific to this issue, a new directive, is in order, and we're working on that. And then the department-wide review ordered by the Secretary is also in order.
Okay, so just for my understanding, because I'm somewhat unfamiliar with your process, but abuses come to your attention, is that correct, Ms. Lerner?
Abuses come to us when whistleblowers come to us.
Okay, whistleblowers come to you, they point it out. You, in turn, send some kind of notification or letter about these abuses to?
The head of the agency?
The head of the agency, but not the Chief Human Resources?
No. In this case, we sent it to then Secretary Napolitano.
Okay. Does the employee who's abusing overtime get a letter of reprimand that goes in their personnel file?
We don't have authority for disciplinary action. They did not report back to us. In this case, sometimes they do, but sometimes, well, in this case,
do you have authority to follow up?
We do have, statutorily, we don't have it explicitly, but we do follow up. In cases like this, we will ask the agency for supplemental reports. In 2 of the 6 cases that we have outstanding, we've asked for additional information. So, yeah, we can follow up.
You can, but not always. Okay. Who's responsible?
If we think that the circumstances require follow-up, we do it. We've done it in many cases since I've taken over as special counsel in 2011. Where an agency promises to make systemic reforms, we do follow up to make sure that they are being taken. So, yeah, we do.
I see you've run out of time. Do you have additional questions? Okay. I have a few more questions I'd like to finish up here, and then we can adjourn. In regards to the employees that abuse overtime, do you counsel the employee? Do you give them a letter of reprimand? Mr. Vitello, did I pronounce that correct?
Vitello, correct. Thanks. So when it is established that employees engage in misconduct, whether for this or other matters, it is referred and they are put through a process with our own HR department for discipline, yes.
Okay, what's the discipline? Do they have to give back the money or what? What's the discipline?
It depends on the allegation. It depends on what the findings develop.
Okay, are you familiar with the case studies that I've read that was given to me in the brief?
Yes, I've considered all the materials that brought us here today.
Okay, employees using overtime to sleep or watch the Internet, what happens to that employee?
So it depends on the findings. If those allegations are proven to be true, then they're put through a discipline process. And just to give you some data, in 2012, there were 84 cases around AUO that were alleged in CBP in 2012 till today, so in the last 2 years. And the range of dispositions that I have, according to the reports, oral or written counseling, closed with no action, which they weren't substantiated. There's 43 that are still open, and then grievances filed against. There's one anomaly case which is still being considered.
Okay, great.
So that process does work, and we have used it.
Well, apparently it's not, because this has been ongoing since 2007, to my understanding, according to this briefing.
But to the extent that the agency is aware of misconduct, it is referred through those processes.
Okay. So you're fixing, on individual cases, you're reprimanding, counseling employees that you found in violation of or improper use of overtime.
And then we're attempting to do structural changes to put this issue behind us. That's why we're excited about the prospect of legislation that gets us to a fix to put this kind of issue behind us.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I have no further questions. Any questions? I would like to thank our witnesses for taking time from their busy schedule to appear before us today. The committee stands adjourned. Thank you.